ray of sunshine. Look at him, still smiling ear to ear before he says a word.
Hey, JP, what's happening?
Our buddy Jon Morosi is with us. The torpedo bat conversation fizzled pretty quickly. It's interesting because obviously the Yankees came out a house of fire with the home runs. Ellie De La Cruz had that big day out there with a couple of home runs, and then the Reds went on to get shut out, I think, 2 or 3 games in a row, 1-0, so there was no offense. Is that becoming a non-story already, the torpedo bat?
Well, I think it's still a story because the bats are here to stay on some level. However, it's not dominating the headlines right now. I think we're realizing that it is one more tool for the hitters to try to stay ahead of the game. And then as we're talking about the kick change with Munoz, and Clay Holmes has popularized it now with the Mets, he and those that are throwing the kick change are trying to stay a step ahead. So I do think it's still here. There are some hitters that are certainly benefiting from it. We were at the game last night in Atlanta, the Phillies and Braves, and we noticed that Bryson Stott had a torpedo bat that seemed to be working okay, but he's batting 8th. He's not exactly off to a scalding start. So it seems as though, and Tom Verducci made this point on our broadcast, it makes the biggest impact perhaps for players like Stott, like Volpe, who are maybe a little bit shorter in stature, and allows, if you have a little bit of a shorter length of arm, it allows you to maybe keep the barrel over the heart of the plate more often and keep the sweet spot in the hitting zone for a little bit longer. That seems to be the way that this has landed, and honestly, why Aaron Judge doesn't need it. And he certainly, all 6'9" of him, 6'8" of him, he doesn't need it right now. So he's just fine the way he is, and certainly why change what's working so well. So I do think for a select number of hitters, it will make sense. You might see some hitters go to that bat as the summer goes along, but right now it is no longer the number one story in baseball.
Hey, JP, with over the weekend, you had Robles go flying into the net out in right field, which that kid, I mean, that took some bravery there.
Yes.
And you just love players like that, but hate seeing him get hurt. And then, the bad news about Ryan Bliss, with the bicep injury, how big of a deal is that? Your predictions of where the Mariners finish, does it change that? Does it change any way of thinking about the Mariners as far as being able to compete for the playoffs?
It does a little, because this is now 2 everyday players that are out of your lineup. And I know Bliss hadn't hit amazingly well so far, but certainly a really dependable defensive player who I believe was just coming into the complete ball player that he will eventually be able to be. I'm a big Ryan Bliss fan, so that was tough news to see. And then Robles as well. He's laying out trying to make a catch in a game the Mariners end up losing. That was just a tough 3 games against a quality team. San Francisco's playing some of the best baseball anywhere right now, and so certainly a lot of teams are going to get swept by the Giants this season. I think that when I look at this team, a couple things stand out. Now the health is becoming a bit of a question. Do they go to a combo of Mastrobuoni and Moore at second base? In right field, you're going to probably see a lot of Raley, which means maybe a bit more of Tellez at first, depending how things play out. We'll see what this means for Solano's role in different ways that he could mix in to the everyday club. But the other piece of the equation is that the Mariners, they have been a dangerous team for years now because their pitching is so good. They've had a fairly average start on the mound. I think they've given up right around a little bit of above average number of runs to this point, which certainly encapsulates pitching and defense altogether. And that's tough, because even in our optimistic projections for this team, right, we had said that what you need is for the pitching to be about as good, and for Julio to have more of a Julio year, and then for a Rosarena and Robles to be productive over a full season. Well, the Robles part already isn't going to happen because he'll be out long term, and the pitching hasn't quite been as sharp as it's been in the past. And part of that certainly might be health related with the Kirby situation. So that's what I'm seeing right now. It hasn't been a disastrous start. Part of the reason for that is really no one's getting off to a phenomenal start in the West, although the Rangers have played pretty good baseball, and the Angels are better than I expected them to be. But this is not like the National League West, where you've got the Padres, Giants, and Dodgers looking dominant, and all of a sudden here are the Rockies at the bottom of the division, and what's their path going to be? The Mariners are not the Rockies. They have a little tougher path to get there, but I can see through the fog here as to what that path might look like.
Yeah, I think maybe some of the pitching numbers are skewed by that Kirby spot because Hancock got blown up in his first game, and then Luis Castillo, the other one they call the Pebble, not the Rock, is giving up some runs in those spots. So maybe that skews the overall numbers a bit. But you're right. I don't know that it's hit the point that we expected from last season. Now, having said that and looking at what they've got to work with here, I mean, it feels like it puts even more on the plates of those we expect to produce. You expect Julio to be a star. Now you really need him to be that guy. You need Arozarena to be the Arozarena of old. And he had they both had great days yesterday. Julio hit the game-tying double in the bottom of the ninth. Arozarena with the grand slam in the game and the walk-off walk. So we saw it yesterday. But what do you think of, especially in the case, I guess, of Julio, a young guy who you can almost feel the pressure build on him at times, like he's trying to live up to the superstar tag, if you will, maybe trying too hard, and now a little bit more of that pressure falls on those guys. What do you think? Is he a guy you look at and say, yeah, he's ready for that, or do you still look at a guy who's still figuring it out?
He's 24. He's still young. Obviously, a 24-year-old still a very young person, but this is his team. It is. The Raleigh news and the extension, really important. But I think when you go back and consider what Julio signed for, when he signed it, that was the franchise deal. That was the Seattle version of the Vlad Jr. contract that just got signed, albeit certainly a lot less pricey, at least on a per-year basis, than what Vladdy signed. But that's the idea here. And it's interesting. Julio traditionally has been a slow starter. We have had numerous conversations the last couple of years on this program about what's going on with Julio. Why is it a slow start? The one thing I'll say is, while the average isn't there, he is hitting for power more now than he did early last season. And remember, last year, the average looked a little bit more normal, but there was low power. I think I'm looking at his day-by-days right now. He didn't hit his first home run last year until April 23rd. He's already got 3 this year. So he's at least hitting the ball and driving it in a way that you would expect him to drive the baseball. That's a really good sign. So it's not just my reflexive optimism here. I really believe that if Julio's making some loud contact early, eventually the average will pick up. And I'm encouraged by seeing the power from him, because you're right. I just have a hard time seeing this team in the playoffs unless Julio is Julio.
Yeah, that's going to be huge. Jon is always Jon, which means he's the best. That's what that means.
He's always a superstar.
He's always a superstar.
Yeah. I appreciate it. I am honored to be part of the same lineup as both of you and Cal today. And by the way, Matty Beniers of your Seattle Kraken will be playing for, I am told, the United States of America at the World Championships this spring, beginning about a month from now in Denmark and Sweden. So you're going to be getting up early in Seattle to watch Matty represent our nation in the World Championships. I'll be filling you in on that later on.
Okay.
Nice.
Jon, we appreciate it. As always,
all the best.
JP.
We'll talk to you next week.